In this video, I'll be demonstrating how to set up your company to use advanced payroll processing within Bookkeeper. Before setting up employees or running payroll, you must set up all payroll options for the company. Start by selecting Company from the Bookkeeper menu and then Manage Current Company Information. In the Company Information screen, select the Additional tab. Click the Payroll button on the lower right-hand side to open up the Company Payroll Setup window. The Tax ID and States tab is where you enter in your Federal Employer Identification number and select which states you will be processing payroll in. The states that are selected will determine which taxes are available for selection in the Taxes tab. You can optionally choose to enter your state income tax ID number as well as the state unemployment insurance ID number. Clicking the Same button will copy the number from one field to the next. You can add or delete states by using the appropriate button at the bottom of the tab. The Wages tab is where you will define all various earning types for your employees and contractors. When no wage types have been defined, the list of predefined wages automatically appears. You can choose to select from this list or simply close it to add your own. If you have time off options that are paid, such as paid vacation or paid personal time, you should include those wage options here. When specifying time off options, you will link the wage to the time off so that time off can be accumulated and earnings calculated. The top portion shows all the wage types that have been defined. The Wage Details section is where you will provide specific information about the wage type. Rate type can either be salary, hourly, or supplemental. You can set a default rate, which will be the default for all employees and contractors that use this wage type, and that can be overridden during the employee-contractor setup. You must specify which GL account this wage will be associated with. If you do not have one set up, click the GL account link to open up the Chart of Accounts maintenance window. In the Wage Options section, you can select whether this wage will be excluded in gross earnings. This will mean that the amount will be added to the net pay after taxes and deductions have been processed. This option is useful for expense reimbursements. The Excluded Net option means this wage will be included in the gross wage but excluded from the net amount. Tip wages is an example where you may want to calculate taxes but not want that amount included in the net pay. You can choose to not have this wage be part of any workers' comp calculation. If you track tip wages, then checking the wages based on tips checkbox will track this amount properly on any tax forms. The Use when calculating time off should be selected if you will be handling time off accruals for your employees, and those accruals are based on time entered during the payroll process. You can also indicate wage should be accumulated for specific boxes on the W-2 or 1099 tax forms. If this wage type is used for workers' comp calculation, you can enter the rate and class code as well. And if this wage is exempt for federal, state, or FICA taxes, you can indicate that here too. In the Taxes tab, Bookkeeper will automatically populate the tax list for all employee and company-related taxes based on the states that were selected in the Taxes and ID tab. If a particular tax is not applicable, you can deselect the active checkbox for that tax. Due to the number of local taxes available, you must select which local taxes you wish to include by clicking the Local Taxes button. The local tax list will also be based on the states in which you indicated you will be processing taxes for. Select the appropriate local tax and click the Select button to add those taxes to the list. Selecting a tax in the list will show additional options relative to that tax. You can select a payee that can assist when making payroll deposits. For unemployment insurance withholdings, you can specify fixed or varied rates to use in the calculations. In the Deductions tab, when no deductions are defined, the list of predefined deductions is automatically shown. You can select from this list or define your own. In the Deduction is For field, you can select whether the deduction is for the employee or just the company. If the deduction is company-based, you have the option to indicate whether this deduction will show on the employee's pay stub for informational purposes. You can select how the deduction is calculated. Selecting a deduction based on another deduction or another tax will show another drop-down allowing you to select the related deduction or tax. The after-tax option is calculated after withholding taxes have been computed, but prior to any after-tax deductions. The net wage option is calculated after all other taxes and deductions have been applied. This deduction will then be computed and the net wage recalculated. The deduction amount field will change to a percentage if the deduction type is based on a percentage. In the limit field, you indicate the amount that the deduction will be capped at, and the limit is based on field allows you to select at what point that cap will occur. In the Time Off tab, you can indicate the various paid and unpaid time off options you want to track. If no time off options are created, the list of predefined options are presented. You can select from the list or create your own. In the Rate of Accrual field, you need to select how the time off hours are accumulated, whether there is no accrual or whether this is an unpaid time off. The Link to Wage field is required when a time off option is also valid for earnings. In the drop-down, you will see all the wage types that you have selected in the Wage tab. Select the wage that will be used to calculate earnings as well as accumulate time off. For example, for paid vacation, you would specify a vacation wage type and link that to a vacation time off. This way, when you enter the amount of vacation hours taken in the time off section when running payroll, the vacation wage will calculate earnings automatically. Please review the video on running payroll to see this in more detail. On the bottom of the tab is a section regarding carrying forward unused time off. When carryover needs to be performed, this button will become active. This is required to be done prior to the first payroll run of the year and will carry forward unused time off to the current year. On the last tab, you define the payroll cycles and their frequency. You need to create at least one payroll cycle. You can define multiple payroll cycles for the same frequency if you wish. For example, you can create a bi-weekly cycle for office staff and a weekly cycle for shop workers. When you create employees and contractors, you will select which cycle they will belong to. Once you have completed filling in information for all the tabs, click OK to save the company setup. You can always make modifications at a later time as necessary. It's important to remember that before you can access any selections in the employee setup, you must first define them in the company setup.